bro, I'm low-key faded, bro.
Ay, güey.
What's this guy supposed to be, the ultimate badass?
They ain't ready. They ain't ready, Jim. They ain't ready. Here we go.
I'm gonna go almond rock here, guys.
I was like, what is it? You ain't Mexican. What is that?
Kind of mercy a little bit though, so I dig a little deep in there, right? But yeah, he did that.
He's in the building!
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the 9th episode of the Frisco Report. I will be joined live here in a few minutes by Mike. He's running a little bit late. I'm taking care of some family business. All right. But we're going to get this thing kicked off tonight, man. As you see the title here, we're going to take a look at the entirety of the Cowboys offseason. Did they fail or did they pass? You know what I mean? So we're going to hit up going all the way back to the end of the season. All right. And we're going to grade this whole thing. You know, did they pass or have they set fans up for failure? You know what I mean? Or did they set us up for a competitive season? So let's talk about it, guys. The end of the year, all right. Cowboys decided not to bring back Mike McCarthy. You know, there was conversations that they were going to bring him back. They wanted him back. You know, and there was like all sorts of rumors as far as like, you know, McCarthy, you know, wasn't really looking at coming back at a cheap rate or on a short-term deal. He wanted a 5-year deal, I think it was, or something like that. But anyway, Cowboys interviewed a couple of people. You know what I mean? Robert Saleh. They interviewed a couple of other people. You know, but we were all waiting for the big names: Ben Johnson, Aaron. You know what I mean? You know, they even interviewed Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore declined a second interview with the Cowboys. So towards the end here, it was like, man, are they going to just have to settle on something? So they landed on Brian Schottenheimer, you know, a consultant, an assistant at the time for the Cowboys over the last couple of seasons. So they announced him as the head coach of the Cowboys for the 2025 season. All right. So, you know, there's that. All right. After that, Cowboys entered free agency frenzy, guys. So, you know, here's where, you know, we thought, was this going to be the same old? You know, were they going to wait for week 3 and 4, you know, to sign some players? Surprisingly, you know, they came out the gates and signed their own guy, obviously. You know, Osa Odigizua got a pretty good size contract, you know, for him. You know, was he worth the money? We'll see. You know what I mean? I've been on record saying that he has hit his ceiling, so you know what you're getting with him, and I think that's what the Cowboys liked about that. You know what I mean? They know what you get with him. You know what I mean? So, but could you have done better? You know, possibly, but you know that's what they decided to go with. And after that, you know, they stayed a little bit active, which was a little bit surprising. You know, but they weren't going after the big ticket free agents. You know, that's just what the Cowboys are, and that's what they're going to continue to do. That's their MO, right? So we know that the Cowboys next year, they're going to do the same thing, and the year after, like that, they're not going to be this team that changes their mind and starts spending a bunch of money. You know what I mean? So, you know, as far as free agents, you know, they signed a bunch of people their own. You know, they brought back C.J. Goodwin. They picked up the option on Juanye Thomas, Hoffman, Tyrus Wheat. They re-signed Marcus Bell, the long snapper Trent Sieg. They brought him back. And then their first external addition was the running back from the Broncos, Javonte Williams. You know what I mean? Had a pretty good rookie season. But after that, injuries started rearing their ugly head. production started going down. He was no longer looked at as a 3-down back for the Broncos. They brought him in as a rotational kind of back here under Sean Payton. And I mean, his averages just continued to go down a little bit. So he was available. Cowboys brought him in here. He was the Cowboys' first external free agent. After that, they brought in Robert Jones from the Dolphins. A guard. So a guy that they started laying the foundation as far as like, if we don't get the guy we want in the draft, at least we have some free agents. So they did that also towards the end. They started bringing in Charles Sadiq, Adejani from the Bengals, former UT tackle. Cowboys had interest in him a couple of years ago when he came out in the draft. And then they brought in a bunch of other old linemen. They re-signed Kevontae Turpin to a 3-year deal. They signed another external guy, Peyton Turner, former first-round bust from the Saints. All right. And they re-signed their punter, and then they made some trades. All right. Not the big name, not the big ticket trades that we thought they were going to make, but they made a trade for Kyer Elam. They just decided to decline the 5th-year option. So another high pick, kind of bust kind of player, Kyer Elam, but it gives them a little bit of depth and protection there with Trayvon Diggs being injured. So, that was a deal that the Cowboys made there. Minimal. I mean, not much draft capital was used on him. I think it was a 5th rounder for him. Then they signed Jack Sanborn, the backup linebacker from the Bears. So obviously there's a connection there with Eberflus. Knows Jack Sanborn pretty good. I liked him coming out of the draft as well, out of the Big Ten. But he didn't really catch on there with the Bears as being an impact kind of linebacker. So he'll be a depth player here for the Cowboys. I'm not expecting big things from him. Maybe he'll give you some depth there in run defense as far as linebackers go. And then they made another trade for Kenneth Murray, another, type of bust, another first-round kind of bust. So the Cowboys were really cornering the market on, bringing in a lot of first-round busts. Tried to do the Will McClay reclamation projects as they always do. And so that was another player that they brought in. Mike, what is going on, bro? We are covering Cowboys' entire offseason moves, and we're going to see, did these guys pass or did they fail? All right, so that's where we're at. But how are you doing, bro?
Doing good, man. Sorry about late. Daughter had a concert. It took a million years to get through that concert, but we got through it. She did a good job, and we had to rush to the Frisco report to pay my dues to all you.
He's in the building!
That's what it is, bro. Man, so dude, yeah, we're just talking about the free agent moves that they've done. We talked about Schottenheimer being the coach here that they signed. So they didn't bring in the big guys. Free agents, we're talking about that. They made a couple of trades, Mike. Kenneth Murray was the one here that they brought in. They re-signed Dakota Shipley. They brought back Israel Mukuamu. And then they signed Miles Sanders to a 1-year deal. Dante Fowler to a 1-year deal, the designated pass rusher. Played a couple of seasons here with the Cowboys, Washington, last year, and then back with the Cowboys. So, and then they most recently, Paris Campbell, another high pick bust. So, as far as the free agencies, Mike, let's grade this part of the offseason. From where we're at right now, did they pass in free agency or did they fail here?
It's a good question. It really is a good question. And I feel like the Cowboys did a lot better than last year. I mean, I think our only acquisition was Ezekiel Elliott. And, Dante Fowler, I think, is the signing that I like the most. I mean, he's coming off a double-digit sack. Double-digit sacks for the Commanders last year, a year off from the Cowboys. If that free agency, I think there's a good signing. Other than that, everything else was typical Cowboys. So the free agency signings, Joe, overall to me is like a C minus all day long. But the best addition was Dante Fowler.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You know what I mean? By no means am I giving it an A or a B, and by no means am I giving them a failing grade as well because they did some stuff to protect themselves as they headed into the draft. They gave some themselves some decent depth players. You know what I mean? They brought in Kenneth Murray, Kyer Elam. But yeah, as far as I guess my favorite free agent signing, Mike. Just skimming over the list here, is probably going to be for me is going to be maybe somebody like a Solomon Thomas. I think I like that one there. I think they got a good deal on him. Um, he's kind of had a resurrection on his career. He's becoming a little bit of a journeyman, but I think he serves a good purpose here for the Cowboys, giving you another three tech defensive tackle behind Osa. So I think that's a good 1-2 punch. You don't see Solomon Thomas as the highly regarded pick that he was when he came out. Like, oh, this is our every down, three tech. He has set himself in that role of being a rotational defensive tackle, and I think that suits him well. And I think he'll give us fresh legs there. You know what I mean? Last year, behind Digizua, who did you really have, right? So I think you got a little bit of an upgrade there, bringing in Solomon Thomas. But I like your pick as well, Mike. But I'm with you. The grade for the offseason free agency moves, I give it a C, a flat C for me.
Yeah, no, I think, the Solomon Thomas pick, going into this offseason, we knew that the trenches needed to be addressed. And, they kind of did it. I mean, you look at, Dante Fowler coming in from the outside on the trenches, Peyton Turner, with the Saints that coming out for the trenches, Solomon Thomas, Robert Jones, the offensive line. So, they tried to take those needs, these glaring needs, and they put a Band-Aid on it, right? That's why it's not like a B plus, an A plus. They did what the Cowboys do, and that is put the Band-Aid, stops the bleeding, but it soaks up the blood, and then what happens? You got to put another Band-Aid on because they don't take care of the wound. So it's a revolving door with the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mike, 100%. Just to go back a little bit because you were coming in here a little bit late. Let's talk about briefly, just real quick. Let's grade the coaching moves, okay? Just overall, Mike, as far as like who they brought in, under Brian Schottenheimer, how would you grade that part of the offseason, the coaching hirings?
When you hear Brian Schottenheimer talk, Joe, it almost sounds like Jason Garrett with the hint of Nick Sirianni. All right, that's the vibe that I get from Schottenheimer. And I reached out to you yesterday, and I said, dude, we better not have the great value Nick Sirianni, right? And kudos to Nick Sirianni. Yes, he's with them nasty, sticky Eagles, but he's lost a Super Bowl and he's won a Super Bowl, right? He got his team there. He built the organization well enough and structural enough, found out how to play a mediocre quarterback, right? And he went with it and he game planned around it and he won a Super Bowl. And so the way Schottenheimer talks, it's a Jason Garrett swag with a little Sirianni arrogance mixed in. He can talk. Can he walk, Joe? So with Schottenheimer, if you listen to him, you kind of get why the Jerry Joneses and the Stephen Joneses was like sold just because of the way he talks. I like that they interviewed multiple candidates and not just Marvin Lewis and then Mike McCarthy's hired. They went through multiple interviews to try to find the right guy. And when you hear Schottenheimer talk, you kind of see it, why they picked him and stuff like that. But Schottenheimer, a rookie head coach, you could talk. Can you walk?
Yeah, no, well said there, Mike. As far as like the coaches, I like how Brian Schottenheimer built the staff here. You know what I mean? Bringing in, the Arizona O-line guy, Clayton, right? Coach Clayton, Clayton Tune, I think is his name, right? Or Clayton. Uh, and then bringing in Connor Riley from the collegiate ranks from Kansas State, right? So I like that move. The wide receiver coach, I think that was needed as well. They did keep Lunda Wells. He was the only one that they kept.
Yep.
And I'm glad they did because I think he's a good tight ends coach, and he gives you a little bit of a backup there for the O line as well with the Connor Riley. Running back coach, some of the other ones. I like the moves overall. I think as far as like the head coaching part of the offseason, I'm gonna give it a C plus. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm not giving it a failing grade, and it's almost a to be determined type of deal. But as far as like going through this exercise, what do we think the grade is for the move? I think it's a C plus, and I think because of the assistants, I like what they did with the assistants. It gives me a little bit more of excitement as far as like the offensive side of the ball, where we really stunk it up last year as far as the running game. I think they brought in a legit O-line guy, right? And a legit O-line coach from Kansas State, the collegiate ranks, who understands this new age type of offenses that we're seeing around the NFL. So I give it overall a C plus for the coaching hirings, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you brought up Clayton Adams. I like how you brought up Connor Riley, Matt Eberflus. All right, linebackers coach for the Cowboys back in 2017 in that age. And then he went on to be a defensive coordinator for the Colts. And then he took on the head coaching role with Chicago Bears. I like the Matt Eberflus signing. He's like my Dante Fowler free agent, so to speak, because he has experience. We have a rookie head coach, Matt Eberflus. He has the experience of being a defensive coordinator, and he has the experience of being a head coach. That can – yeah, he wasn't a successful head coach, right? But sometimes you have to find your swag, and sometimes no excuses, but it just didn't work out for him. But the defensive side of the ball, I think, is taken care of, and that mentor aspect of it is there just in case Schottenheimer needs that mentorship from Matt Eberflus. So I do like that Matt Eberflus hire.
Yeah, the Matt Eberflus, I think it's a good hire. You know what I mean? I know when he was here, and we got into some of the playoff games and some of these. I didn't quite like the bend don't break type of philosophy that he kind of had a little bit of influence from Marinelli on that. So, but I think that his experiences, like you pointed out, Mike, have made him a better coach. So I'm hoping that round 2 of Eberflus will be improved. You know what I mean? And that the defense will have its own thumbprint because he is the official defensive coordinator here now. He's not under somebody or or this sorts of things. So yeah, that's a good one there, Mike. We have a super chat in the house here, Mike Berlerna. I feel like Kyer Elam was a very lazy signing, and we need to address wide receiver too because I think this is going to be Tolbert's last year with us. Yeah, so the Kyer Elam was a trade, right? So
yep.
you gave up a pick for him. Mm-hmm. He was a former, I think, was a first or second round pick.
He was a first round pick. Yep.
Yeah, so high pick didn't really work out there in Buffalo, so they shipped him out to us. And like I said, Cowboys declined his 5th-year option, so he's got to prove it, to the team that he's with now for the Cowboys. So what's he going to give us? We'll see. But I don't know if I'd call it lazy. I think it was just like filling a spot. You know what I mean? And it's kind of what the Cowboys do. They're going to look for the cheap free agent reclamation projects.
Yeah, 100%. This boils back to the Band-Aid I was talking about, Joe. Mm-hmm. They put the Band-Aid there. They just drafted Revel, with an ACL guy. But will Revel be the wound healer, right? Or is Revel just another Band-Aid too that's going to solve up that bleeding? So no, I like the competition that maybe he could bring. Sometimes new scenery helps players. I know this isn't something new for the Cowboys. They did it with Noah Igbenogany, if you remember him. They did it with Andrew Booth Jr. And now they're doing it with this guy. All three of those are corners, so it ain't nothing new from the Cowboys.
Yeah, and that's what it is, right? So they have an MO, they have a style, and you should be able by now understand what they're going to do in the offseason. We know that, like I was telling them earlier, Mike, next season and the season after, you know that this is what they're going to do, and this is their game plan. This is what they do. They're not going to change it, you know. So yeah, and as far as like we need to still address the wide receiver 2 position, I think it's a good question. I think it's one of the you could say holes in the team, you know. And yeah, I think this is the final season for Tolbert. You know what I mean? He's he is what he is, but he has the biggest sponsor in the room, which is Dak Prescott. You know, Dak Prescott loves Jalen Tolbert. You know what I mean? And if you have that, you know, you're gonna keep making the team. But you know, fans know better, bro. Like he just isn't enough. You know, he'll make a play here and there, and he'll disappear for a couple of games, or he'll disappear for the rest of the game. And I don't know if that was an influence, you know, with Brandon Cooks, that kind of crap, where you make a play and take the rest of the game off, or what it was. You know what I mean? Because Mike, we looked at Tolbert coming out of college. We liked him. You know what I mean? We thought that he was going to be a dog, playing with swagger, and we haven't really seen that part of his game, not at the next level. You know what I mean? So what we thought we were getting has not translated quite here to the NFL level, Mike. So what do you do?
No,
Are they going to roll with this, or do you go and make a trade? Do you go Amari Cooper, or what do you think is going to happen there?
No, you have to listen to how these guys talk, right? Like if you follow the Frisco Report, we don't shoot you all these make-believe scenarios, right? We try to be a straight shooter. We shoot from the hip. If you listen, Schottenheimer said we have to develop our guys. And he brought up Jalen Tolbert, he brought up Jalen Brooks, and he even brought up Jonathan Mingo. That this is the name that we have to remember. Jonathan Mingo. They gave him a 4th-round pick last year. They have to see what they have in this kid. Bringing in Amari Cooper. I know I want Amari Cooper. I talked about Amari Cooper last show, but bringing in Amari Cooper hinders your development in these 3 guys that I just mentioned. Let these 3 guys battle it out, right? You got a couple of free agents, undrafted guys that could make something happen. You know, Cowboys kind of hit and miss on these undrafted guys. Could one of these free agents you see undrafted guys be that guy, right? So if you listen to the way they talk, I will be shocked if they bring in Amari Cooper or there's rumors about George Pickens with the Steelers. I'd be absolutely shocked because they already said we got to develop our guys.
Yeah. No, that's straight facts, bro. I honestly think that they are not going to do any of these moves. I think they're going to do what they do as far as trading for a wide receiver. And we've covered this a couple of times already, Mike. You pointed it out. Every 10 years, they draft a wide receiver in the first round. And then in between those 10 years, they make a big trade for a wide receiver. So Cowboys, they might make a trade, but not right now. I think it'll be like Mike said, they're going to see what happens here. You get to the trade deadline, and then maybe they make a deal there. You know what I mean? So, and it may not be George Pickens. It could be for somebody else, but it could be somebody that they're going to give up, you know, a decent pick or multiple picks for. That's what they do. They do it all the time. In between their star wide receiver, they make a trade for somebody, an established wide receiver. So who will it be? Will it be this year, this season? I think they have a lot of pressure on them to make a move. You know what I mean? And I think they're kind of throwing chum in the water for the fans, like, oh, we're making inquiries, you know, to keep the fans having hope and crap. You know, like, oh, they're gonna do something, but it probably won't happen until the damn trade deadline, Mike. Honestly, I think that's what they're gonna do.
You know, Joe, that's a great point. It really is, because that's the Cowboys' MO. That's what the Cowboys do. And, you know, it's rare that they go off script. I mean, it really is rare that they go off script. And so when you look at it, what you just said is 100% factual. Like, we can go hype up Tet McMillan. We're wasting our breath, right? We can talk about second round guys like Luther, because that might be more realistic for the Cowboys. And so whenever you look at this franchise, this is what you just said, Joe. 100% accurate.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. I mean, and we all I think agree that we do need a number two. So there's no doubt about that. But we're talking about what the Cowboys are probably going to do, and that's what they do. You know, the Cowboys are going to sit on their hands, frustrate the hell out of fans. You know, the only thing that might speed this thing up is a camp injury, right? To one of these, maybe Tolbert or Mingo or something like that. You know, maybe that would facilitate or speed up a trade or picking up a free agent off the bench. But yeah, very interesting indeed, Mike. Now we got past the hiring coaches, free agency, then we get to the NFL draft part of the offseason, Mike. You know, we've kind of been talking about this here recently. We've let the dust settle, as they say. Looking at the whole draft here for the Cowboys, including the undrafted guys, how do you feel they did there in the draft?
I I think this is just Cowboys corner talking, all right. I think they did a lot of things right. You know, Tyler Booker, the second round pick guy who can rush the passer, and that's what he does well. Then then they go in the middle of the draft with a couple of running backs, and then you close it out with two defensive tackles. Like, if this draft can hit on every pick, which that's rare, right? I mean, that's super rare. But if this draft class can stay here and play decent for the next 3 years, all that did was help you. All that did was help you. Now, these defensive tackles, they have an uphill climb. They do. They just have an uphill climb. That's what it is. But for the most part, I like what they did. I like their strategy. Now, going second round with that defensive end, it was like, okay, you didn't go running back here. You know, you didn't go wide receiver here. And then they kind of played their cards at running back in day 3. So, and then they traded up for a linebacker, Shamir James. And so you're like, okay, that was a sneaky need. So I think they did decent. Now, I still stick with the B draft grade. I do stick with that. But I like the strategy of it. I like how they built it.
Yeah, it really does feel like they went board as far as, like, you know, who they drafted. Like you said, Mike, they got value there with Donovan there in the second round. It felt a lot like the 2014 draft, where you get Zach Martin in the first and you get D-Law in the second round. This draft feels like that, and coincidentally, both those guys left the organization this offseason. So Zach is gone, D-Law's gone. They brought their replacements in this draft. You know, you got Zach's replacement with Tyler Booker, and then you get, I think, an upgrade. You know, potentially an upgrade with Donovan filling in the spot for D-Law. So the rest of the draft, you know, they do what they do as well. You know, they draft banged up guys. It wasn't the second round, but this time it was a third round with Savon Ravel. He looks like he's going to get the opportunity to hit the ground running here and try to hold it down while Trayvon comes back from his injury. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and especially the early week 1 game. That, you know, the week 1 game is probably going to be a premier game, you know, a Sunday night game or you know, something of that stature. So yeah, man, I think they did what they did. I think they followed their board. You know, we all wanted the running back for sure earlier, but we I think they did really good with Jadon Blue. I think that's one of my favorite picks in this draft. I think that he's gonna really contribute, you know, like in a Tony Pollard type of way in the passing game and the speed. You know, speed kills, bro. All right.
100%. 100%. And we get to figure out, do they know how to utilize these running backs, right? Because you look at Jadon Blue, you look at Devontae Williams, which those are probably going to be your two starting running backs with Deuce Vaughn being the odd man out this offseason. And then you got maybe Miles Sanders there competing with Hunter Lemke down the line, right? But we're going to get to see if Schottenheimer knows how to use these different backs. It's going to be real interesting to see, Joe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good question here from Asian Persuasion, Jeb. Do we still sign Gilmore for depth, Mike? There was the, not a rumor, but it was reported that Stephon Gilmore was at the Star in Frisco the day before the draft, right? So, do they still bring him in? Do you need him at this point?
I look at Gilmore like a Malik Hooker signing, right? They didn't do it till training camp. I think they're going to see what they have in OTAs, mini camps, organized team activities, those OTAs. I think they're going to see what they have there, and then they might pull the trigger. Maybe in the second week of training camp, we'll see how Rebel looks. We'll see where Diggs is at post-injury. And then if they really feel like Stephon Gilmore needs to be there, his services are needed, they'll sign him.
Yeah, I think that's where he's going to be at unless somebody else signs him up first, right? So he still remains unsigned. You know what I mean? So a lot of these guys that are still lingering around, I think they'll get their opportunity once camp starts, preseason. People get dinged up, they get injured, and then they get the phone call. So I think a lot of these guys that we're talking about, whether it's Amari Cooper or Gilmore or Keenan Allen's, these types of dudes, they will eventually get the phone calls, but it'll be due to depth issues, injuries, these types of things. So Cowboys are not at that situation right now. Although there's rumors of George Pickens, this type of dude, another knucklehead. Do you want to bring in a knucklehead like that here, Mike? George Pickens.
Oh, you listen to the culture that Schottenheimer wants to bring. He did a press conference the other day, I believe it was on Sunday, and he talked about there's going to be some guys here that are not going to be the type of guys you want on your team, but you need those guys because they bring an edge to the field. And so when he says that, he's absolutely not scared of a guy like George Pickens. He just isn't. What does that do for your locker room? What does that do for your culture? I think he did something funky with putting Micah's locker with Dak Prescott right beside there. Does Dak keep Micah locked in, right? How do those distractions off the field, work with Micah? But back to the point, he's not scared. He could put, Pickens next to a Stephon Gilmore if they were to sign him in, right? Put him right next to an older vet that might keep him in line.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And the funny thing about it too is that that is the rumor of Pickens. It honestly, at the end of the day, it'll be somebody else. It'll be somebody that we're not really talking about right now. The Cowboys always pivot and go another angle. They're just testing the waters, I think. Like, let's throw this out there and see how fans are responding to this type of rumor. You know what I mean? Like, they're kind of smart in that kind of way. You know what I mean? So it'll probably be somebody else. I don't think it'll be Pickens. It'll probably be somebody else. Maybe somebody of an even better stature. Like I said, Mike, when they make a trade for receiver and the trade deadline to couple with their number one, it's somebody that's well established who has skins on the wall. You know what I mean? They're going to give, maybe a first for this guy or something like that. That's what they've done, right? So think about what I would do is look at the players out here who's on the end of their rookie deal, or maybe somebody a good number two that you would trade a first round for. You know what I mean? So those are the type of guys I would look at, because that's what the Cowboys would do. You know what I mean? So I would look at somebody like T. Higgins, somebody like that, right? But there's not a lot of these guys out there, so we'll see what they do there, Mike. But it's interesting how that looked. The undrafted free agents, they're getting a lot of the hype as usual, Mike. So we talked about this offline. Has the allure faded a bit here? We talked about a lot of these guys. They weren't some of the more recognizable undrafted guys that we've had here in the past, Mike. So is the allure fading away from even getting undrafted free agents to sign here in Dallas, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the list of undrafted free agency signings. It's a short list, probably one of the shortest lists in recent memory. But you look at their free agency list, you look at their re-signings, you look at their trades, long list, right? So you can only have 90 guys. They made a couple of adjustments. They cut a couple of guys there, Malik Davis and all those guys, but you can only have 90. And they really cluttered up the line with a lot of these late pre-draft offensive lineman signings and stuff like that. They could cut some other guys and make some more room for some undrafted guys, but right now this is the list. But I'm surprised at how short the list is. Usually they get about 10 or more in there.
Yeah, it is. It is a shorter list. But Cowboys Nation fans, despite it, they latch on to a guy, right? Like, oh, this dude's definitely making the team. This guy could be a potential Pro Bowler up the ass and this and that every year, bro. So, who is it this year? There's a couple of receivers a lot of people are latching on to. And then you got the linebacker, Justin Barron. People are attaching to him now. The safety from Syracuse as well. They're latching onto him. You know what I mean? So I think some of these guys will have legitimate opportunities. You know what I mean? The tight end that brought in from Auburn, taking a deeper look at him, he'll push John Stevens Jr. because John Stevens Jr. just can't stay healthy. So he cannot afford to get dinged up this preseason, Mike, or he's going to lose his job to one of those guys, I have a feeling, Mike.
No, and he could. It's time for these guys to ship up or shape up. Best ability is what, Joe? Availability.
Ability, bro. Yeah, man, it's good to look at these guys. So looking at the draft, I stick great on the draft as well. It's a C plus. So when you look at the whole entirety of it, Mike, the coaching, hiring, the assistants, free agency, trades, draft, undrafted free agents, the overall grade, Mike, I give this offseason for the Cowboys. I'm right there at a C plus for me. I think that's the overall grade for the Cowboys offseason. What do you give it, Mike? The overall.
Be honest with you, I was saying C plus in my head before you gave your answer. I think overall it's a C plus. They didn't do anything splashy with coaching, but they did do smart coaching. They didn't do anything splashy in free agency, but they did their typical Band-Aid stuff. And then the draft was probably the better option of the three. So it is definitely a C plus. Now, this is pre, right? They could make it an F. They could make it an A. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But this is pre-thoughts here.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, you're right. All of these could change, and they can be confirmed by mid-season. They could be confirmed. They'll definitely be confirmed at the end of the season. At the end of the season, we'll be like, okay, Brian Schottenheimer, they screwed that up, or it could be, okay, we improved, we made a wild card, but again, we get knocked out again. So, they have to figure a way to advance in the playoffs if they make it, man. If this division got better along with the Cowboys, I think the Cowboys improved their roster, but so the rest of the division might,
Yeah, I think the Eagles lost a lot of pieces. How do they bounce back from that? I think their defensive line kind of overshadows that. Where the Eagles, the Commanders, same thing. They lost some pieces there. I mean, losing a double-digit sack guy on your defense might hurt you just a little bit in Dante Fowler. But it's all about adapting, right? It's all about coaches and adapting. Coaching matters. What do the Dallas Cowboys coaches do to adjust to how strong this division could possibly be? And so, the Giants might have got a little better because they got Jameis Winston's going to win you a couple games. Russell Wilson win you more than Jameis Winston, and then they got Jackson Dart. Did they get Jackson Dart?
Jackson Dart.
Yeah, they got Jackson Dart too. So if this coaching staff can't do it and can't adjust to what was now a strong division, look out. Cowboys could be sitting in the basement pretty quick.
Yeah, they really have no room for error. You know what I mean? We had a bad offseason. It was lame duck season. So we kind of knew that this was going to happen, right? You had your coach on a lame duck year. You know what I mean? So that's what happens. And then we'll see what Brian Schottenheimer brings here. First time head coach, definitely has the lineage, from his dad. His dad was a very competitive coach there in the AFC for many decades. Had some very competitive teams competing in the championship games. Very memorable games, very tough teams. So I would like to see that translate into Brian Schottenheimer. If he can have any bit of what his dad did for the NFL, we could have some good teams here. But we'll see, Mike. We'll see here really quick. But great conversation here, indeed, Mike. Do you have anything before we head out for the evening, Mike?
No, guys, it's good to see you guys this week on the Frisco Report. Sorry I was late to the show. I hate being late to things, so that's going to be bothering me for the rest of the night, all right? But I'm glad I was able to come in and talk with you guys.
Yeah, man. No, it's quite all right. Life happens, and family definitely comes first no matter what. So no need to apologize, bro. Not at all, man. Everybody in the chat box and everybody watching the replay, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share. It helps out the channel, helps out the algorithm, and it really helps us, continue to put more content and thoughtful conversation out there as far as, one of the better Cowboys podcasts out there. So, guys, we really do appreciate it. We can't do this without you, and we'll see you for the next one, guys. Peace out.
Jet Li, thank you for 30 months of membership. Can't wait to see how this season plays out. Yes, sir. Peace out.